Welcome to Igniting Change, the podcast where we explore innovation, industry trends, and how tech for good is solving the world's biggest challenges. Let's get into it.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Igniting Change. Today we are very fortunate we are speaking to Paul Smith, who is the CIO at Amnesty International. So hi Paul, thank you for making time for us today.
Thanks for having me, Sophie.
So Paul started, from stalking your LinkedIn, I can see you started as a board advisor back in 2021 at Amnesty and joined as CIO in 22. Is that right?
That's right.
Amazing. So you're currently the CIO, but your career is, you have worked in, obviously terribly young, but for someone so young, you have worked in so many different roles, all obviously kind of in the tech space. What was it that originally drew you into working in tech?
A great question. I think it's a really hard one to answer specifically, but I guess I've always been purpose-driven by nature. I was a young father, so I guess it was probably inevitable at some point I'd be doing more to try and give back or make a difference more broadly. But I guess I've got lots of experience within experience. I've been very lucky in the organizations and sectors I've worked in. They've exposed me to some fantastic things. So, in defense, I touched on construction and equipment and systems, global logistics, air traffic control, power generation. That's just one. I've then worked agency side and touched in lots of sectors there. But I've also done lots of advisory roles and lots of volunteering. And I think when I look back, I can kind of see how all that came together in my current role, because it's all relevant. There's value in all of those things that I can channel for good in my current role to help people I'm with. But I don't think there's the single moment or a single thing that made it happen, to be honest.
And you did, I think it was business at university, but was it from a technical perspective? Did you sort of play?
I didn't take a traditional tech route, to be honest with you, through education. I did science at college, and I always took more of the business route through school. It's only sort of later in life I went back and did tech, but my master's is in business administration, and I found that can be a particular advantage to me when speaking to colleagues and those that I work with, not just coming up at it from kind of a tech perspective. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's such a huge skill set that you have to be able to develop. I'm COO of a tech company, so I am not technical, but I deal with technical all the time. And that ability to kind of bridge across the technical to non-technical, I think is it takes a long time to learn, but I think once you can do it, it's an invaluable skill. But it's an interesting
business first.
Yeah,
business
definitely.
first.
And I think I again, from stalking your LinkedIn, can see there's a few sort of testimonials from people saying that you are fantastic at bridging that gap between the technical and the non-technical, and kind of explaining it in a way that makes sense and looks out for the business. That's obviously been a non-traditional route that's served you well.
Yeah, it has.
And you're at Amnesty now. You've been there in an advisory role and then full-time since sort of 2021, so a few years. What was it about Amnesty that drew you to that? And what does your role look like now?
Another good question. I think, well, there aren't many people that don't know who Amnesty is. Maybe not necessarily what we do specifically, but I guess I was drawn to Amnesty just by the mission and the opportunity that I can make a change on such a massive global scale. We are I think we are possibly the most diverse organization in the world, in my opinion, by any measure. We're 10 million supporters across 150 countries. We deal with every belief, every faith, every set of values, every region, every language, and that's interesting to me. I like that kind of variety and the opportunity to learn as well. So that's probably what drew me to it. I thought I could make a difference. I thought there was a lot to do, and I thought I could help the organisation move that needle forward a little bit.
Nice. I have to admit, I'm a massive Amnesty fangirl. So I was very excited and kind of put my hand up for this particular podcast, just because I think the work that you do personally is amazing. But as an organisation, Amnesty was what got me into the purpose-led piece. So I ran the Amnesty International Club when I was at school and led some of the campaigns. I absolutely loved it. I had sort of grand visions of I wanted to work on the front line, be like a ground worker, and then realise that I'm quite timid and I'd probably be better off in the computer side of things. So, but I absolutely love it. I think it's just an incredible organisation.
Oh, thank you. It's a privilege to represent Amnesty.
Yeah, I bet. And I guess, obviously you're CIO, which is it's a very, very cool role. Very, we are all in tech. We are extremely cool. But I'm guessing CIO at Amnesty is maybe a bit different to CIO in other roles. Is there sort of particular things that are different, particular things that carry across?
Yeah, I think CIO is a term that's it's used in a lot of organizations, but it's very different from one organization to the next and one sector to the next. Here, my role is centered on information and technology. So we very specifically and discreetly call those two things out. And the reason for that is twofold, really. One, because my role generally is around protecting, enabling and guiding employees, volunteers and supporters of Amnesty and those we serve through information and tech. But secondly, it's because my role focuses as much on the information management aspect as it does on the technology. So, for example, on the one hand, I'm looking at identification, design, provision, and sustainability of inclusive and equitable tech and services that facilitate such a globally diverse organization for its synchronous and asynchronous working. But on the other hand, I'm working with teams that manage Amnesty's 60-year digital and physical archives and institutional memory. That's part of my remit. And it's fantastic. You know, we have pictures, we have messages on toilet paper, we have letters, and this is all part of the information and as I say, the institutional memory that makes us who we are. But weaved in that, I've got, you know, your traditional cybersecurity. For Amnesty, that means defense against potentially nation-state actors, digital security management, all of the traditional support services. But there's a very discrete focus for me also on values for money in the sector that we work in and collaboration because of that diversity I spoke about. You know, you need to provide the ability for teams to work with each other across teams, across organizations, across industries, so that they can multiply the capability of the individual through lessons learned and actually just be resourceful in general. So it's a fantastically diverse role. I get to work with some amazing people, hear some amazing stories, see some amazing impact, and I really enjoy it.
That's amazing. And that's, I guess, no 2 days are the same, right? It sounds like there's enough to be getting on with that you're kind of,
Absolutely.
you're never going to get bored. And I mean, huge admiration. I do a bit of the cybersecurity as well. My tinfoil hat is kind of always on, but the kind of information that Amnesty is dealing with, not the pressure, I guess, like you say, is the privilege. I mean, a bit of pressure, but you know, but to protect that because it is, you know, can literally be life and death if it's not gosh, we had a security breach. That's a bit embarrassing.
Yeah, it really can. I mean, I've worked in this industry a long time now, and the bad guys have always been out to get us when it comes to cybersecurity, right? But it's real, yeah. It's real. Yeah. It's a badge of honor for those that don't necessarily agree with what we do and how we do it to try and disrupt our operations or uncover whistleblowers, you know, and find out who's supporting us and helping us. It's a badge of honor. So we have a lot to do in that space to protect our people and the operations of the organization.
Yeah, because I guess your strike or whatever your equivalent of the sessions where you're kind of doing hypothetical scenarios must get pretty intense of what could happen because it's kind of not, you know, sort of your day-to-day kind of information.
And my head of information security, if he was here, he'd be saying, we don't practice till we get it right, we practice till we don't get it wrong.
Nice.
Which I love.
I like that. That's good. That is, I might steal that one. That's great. And you mentioned about kind of the working across all the different teams, and obviously it's a huge organization. You've got people working all over the world doing the sort of async and all the rest of it. I mean, what kind of challenges do you come up against when you're trying to do sort of tech rollouts to an organization of that size and that level of diversity in terms of supports and everything?
Diversity in itself, to be honest, can be a challenge and an opportunity. So recognizing firstly that you're dealing with people and every type of people, and that everyone is starting from a different place in terms of their understanding, their education, their awareness, their experiences, their beliefs, their fears, their hopes. Understanding that to start with, I think is really important. And so creating the opportunity to talk, to communicate, to learn from people you work with, from lessons of the past, from other organizations that have done the same thing is really important. But I guess, so what really does digital transformation look like here is probably a big subject, but I'll have a stab at it, I guess. So we are an investigative journalism and campaigning organization at our core. And that includes everything to do with the information management lifecycle that you might imagine, you know, getting stuff in, doing stuff with it, producing reports, advocating for impact. So wherever there is information or data or a collaboration need, there's an opportunity in tech for me. So firstly, making sure that any solutions or services that we manage or create are aligned with our ethics and values and our external policy position is the first starting point for us. We have to eat our own dog food. We need to understand business capabilities and pain points right across the value chain, which can be different by the geographical location, by team, and a number of other factors. But understanding the start point so you can understand what you need to do to get to the desired point. You know, for the techies out there, we call that the as is and the to be. But understanding your as is important because that dictates the work to be done and the things that might trip you up. So understanding then how those pain points map to business processes and people's day jobs and their digital friction is really important. But we've got to apply ethical and principle-based technology decision-making and governance. And put really simply, that means demonstrably doing the right thing for the right reason the right place, the right time, the right way, the right cost, etc., etc. But making sure that resilience, security, and sustainability are all built in by default and by design. So we have to work super collaboratively with users and benefits owners to co-create sustainable value for money solutions that actually deliver on the needs and the value in their eyes. And we have to be exemplary at end-to-end communication. So as I say, being inclusive, considering multi-channel communications to enable maximum input, but also make sure that the voice of the user is central and heard. Sorry, long answer to a short question.
No, it's a great answer. And presumably there's a huge amount of onus on kind of accountability in terms of when it's not right. That kind of thing where you roll out a process or a tool or something and you've put so much into it. And then when you realize it's not working, that moment where you have to go, God, this isn't the right thing, we're going to have to roll back or try something else, is always quite difficult. But I imagine that's absolutely key, again, because of all the reasons.
There can be. And there can be. I think anyone that's a responsible professional takes a level of accountability themselves, regardless.
Yeah, you've got to be able to put your hand. That was the wrong call. That wasn't quite right.
But at the same time, we're only human, and if ever there are any issues in rollouts or things that were all well intended, typically usually a process issue, not a person issue.
Yeah, it usually is, isn't it? I'm a big fan of systems thinking, and I mean, it's a bit of a depressing concept, I suppose, but the whole thing of like today's solutions are tomorrow's problems. Like you always go in with the best intention, and you're trying to solve something,
Absolutely.
and then you're like, oh God, that didn't. Yeah, and I can imagine with an organisation as large and kind of complex as yours, that is a day-to-day thing. But that sounds absolutely fascinating, and again, sounds like it probably keeps you quite busy. Are there any kind of sort of, in terms of digital transformation and what that kind of looks like, is there any kind of projects or initiatives or anything that you can tell us about that you're particularly excited about going on at Amnesty at the moment?
We're always working hard to make sure that the basics are right, and our core systems are matched to current needs. So making use of evergreen platforms, making use of product developments. We're looking at emerging tech, just like many other organisations, to make sure we're selecting the right things for the right reasons. And aware of risks. But there's always a lot going on in the cybersecurity space, as I mentioned, for us, in optimization of business processes, looking for automation opportunity. On the culture side, actually, on the education side, raising digital literacy, raising data literacy across the organization, really important for us. So lots of activity going on there. And we're doing a lot of work generally around digital experience management, as I touched on earlier, to make sure we understand where business processes are changing, where they're faltering, where we have issues or opportunities. So always a very diverse portfolio of activity, to be honest, but trying to focus on the right things at the right time.
Nice. Yeah, well, there's always something to do, isn't there? And you're never done with security in particular. And in terms of the technical landscape, so you mentioned about the kind of, the education piece and kind of bring up digital literacy and everything. I think we talked about this very briefly in the sort of the pre-recording bit, but I've been working in the tech space for a mere 13 years, which doesn't feel like long now, but this, I would say, is such a huge period of change. I don't think I've seen as much change, or maybe it just feels like it might be my echo chambers change or something, but the technical landscape is massively changing and moving really quickly at the moment. What are your kind of, you personally, just having worked in this space for a long time, what are your thoughts on the current landscape and the pace of change that we're seeing?
I think it's exciting and terrifying in equal measure. I think, I was lucky to be around, I think, in my early career when email just reared its head. I can't remember such a disruptive change as what we're seeing now with the accessibility of artificial intelligence. Say I've been around for a while, right? But it's never been accessible on the level that it has been in the last 2 years. And I'm really excited about that on the one hand, because I think it provides opportunity for people to get access to knowledge that they couldn't before. Your average individual at home that's looking for law advice, other advice, a topic to be explained in them in a language they understand, and to be able to converse with something for relevant, point in time answers to questions, rather than write something in Google and have to trawl through 3 or 4 pages trying to find the right document or answer. So I find it a fantastically powerful assistive aid for those that may be disadvantaged in some way. I think it's also quite exciting from the fact that it will open up new opportunities. I think someone said to me not long back, this is the worst this technology is ever going to be. That's quite a powerful thought when you pause for a moment there, because there are some good things already. There are some risks and issues already, but this is hopefully the worst it's ever going to be, which I find quite interesting. I am fearful, on the other hand, around the potential to widen digital divides, because if you've got a computer, you've got access to the internet, you've got access to those tools, you're off, right? You're power assisted. If you don't, you could find yourself further lagging behind. And there are parts of the world where we're still struggling for reliable power. We don't have connectivity. What does that mean in terms of a two-tier society? So I do worry about that. And I'm also concerned, about making sure we're on top of things like climate impact and ethical pieces, as you would expect from who I work for. So I think big tech can do more in terms of talking to us a little bit on that front and consulting with organizations. But I also appreciate that lots already been done. So we'll have to think about it for sure.
Yeah, it's such an interesting time. I mean, just trying to keep up with everything that's coming out and kind of understand the pace of change, and that feeling of almost like you should be using the latest technology, and if you're not using it, then why are you kind of lagging behind? I mean, you mentioned earlier a 60-year-old system, legacy systems like that, trying to apply the latest technology is not something you can just kind of slap on and be like, now work together. That's
not quite a 60-year-old system, but certainly a 60-year-old organization with a 60-year-old institutional memory, and in that ranges from paper through digital formats that are now obsolete. So it's that whole range of digital legacy we need to manage.
Yeah, and it's just trying to, I think, sort of maintain the understanding. I mean, just in terms of our team, and we're a team of developers, and they're even within that sort of echo chamber of they're feeling like there's a huge divide between them of like how many people can keep up with what's coming out and who's having time to experiment with different things, and the level of understanding and the level of kind of wanting to lead into it as well. I think there's a huge thing of people that have built careers over the last 20 years in a particular role and doing a particular thing, and then there's this thing that's like, is this a threat? Generally it's a positive, but there is that very human reaction to it, I think, that's happening.
Yeah,
certainly.
absolutely. And to extrapolate a little bit more, I think I even heard someone from Microsoft talk quite recently around, or a couple of organizations talk about how big business systems are going to become obsolete. RPs will go because everything will become microservices, interactions, integrations, and all through these user experience windows that we now find ourselves using, where data is brought to the user. Things are very conversational with the data. There's no dashboards. You're talking to your data, tell you something, or telling your computer to complete a process for you. So I think that's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I think as well, the generative data piece is so interesting in terms of the diligence that's happening around that, of like what is true and what isn't true. Like anyone can generate a chart or an infographic or anything now and kind of circulate it online and say, this is a thing. I've seen countless things online that you look at, and it doesn't take long to debunk and go, okay, well, that's not legit. If people aren't doing that, the amount of misinformation now that can be generated and circulated is, I think, absolutely terrifying.
Very true.
For an organisation like Amnesty, you guys obviously, like you said, doing this sort of investigative journalism, that must be a huge piece of just kind of wading through all of that misinformation and how to manage that.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, at the end of the day, tech is a tool, so with generative AI and every other tool out there can be used for good or for nefarious purposes. That challenge isn't new. What's different now is the speed and scale on which that can be done.
Yeah.
It can only be done by these tools. And the only thing that can keep up that level of speed and scale is kind of an adversarial positive approach, if you see what I'm saying. I think that's the challenge. It's not the challenge that people will now take something and do bad things with it. It's the fact that you or I have accessibility to these things now that we can just produce at the push of a button, and not just one, but 500, the push of a button. That's the scary piece, I think.
Yeah, I think, like you say, it's the scale of it, isn't it? It's just the sheer sort of volume of it, of what can be done. And, the flip side of that is that there's grassroots organizations now that previously couldn't afford to employ a team of marketing people or whatever, who can now, create so much more content, and that's kind of leveled that playing field in such a wonderful way, where they can create so much more and get their word out so much better. So it's important to focus on both, because I think it's quite easy to go down that route where you're like, oh my God, the robots are coming and it's going to be terrible.
Exactly.
But it's not.
It's not all bad. There are opportunities as well as risks,
Exactly. There's always that balance. And I think I've, seen, again, stalking you endlessly, but you talked in interviews about how kind of as an individual and as an organization, you're kind of trying to sort of help people kind of navigate this kind of the pace and how things are changing. You mentioned about sort of the capacity building, so like listening, learning, helping and leading, in that order, which sounds sensible. And are you getting lots of feedback from people? Is it sort of, have you got good collaboration, people kind of coming to you with sort of fears and ideas?
Yeah, I think to a degree. I think, you first have to start with conversations on things, and that's how you walk the talk for being user-centered. You have to provide users and the people you work with the opportunity to talk to you and be approachable. Maybe it's not just a case of we've sent an email, you didn't reply back, therefore, you had nothing to say. You have to meet people where they are. So I think there's a lot to think about in terms of rolling user-centered tech out in that sense.
I think the safe space thing is absolutely key. I think there's a thing of people feeling like they don't want to say, actually, I don't understand this, or I don't know how to use this, or I'm worried about the effect of how this is going to be used. So I think giving people the space to air that is really important. I think we've seen, I mean, we are a very, very small organization in comparison, but just being able to talk about it and kind of, as having our kind of senior technical members being like, we're struggling to keep up as well. Like, we're doing as much research as possible, but it is overwhelming. You're not in the sort of minority for thinking there's a lot, because it feels like a lot, because there is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think with today's tech functions, you can't be arrogant, Sophie. You just can't. You can't sit here and think you know it all and everyone else is dumb. Even in your own organisation, I think, I'm lucky I get to work with some of the most intelligent people in the world in my organisation. So for me, just enabling them to talk to each other is helpful. You struggle in this aspect, but this is how we're using that technology in our team. This is what we're doing with it. And let me show you kind of peer-to-peer horizontally. And not just in our own organisation, but talking to other non-profits like us. We're all trying to do the same thing with the same stuff, and being resource constrained and learning from each other, I think, is really important. You've just got to drop the ego.
Definitely. And I think the learning and the experimentation piece is really important as well. And that thing of kind of not just necessarily applying something new. And this isn't anything particularly new to the last couple of years, but feels kind of more exacerbated now with just the amount that you can do in such a short time. But that thing of going sort of start small, start with a pilot, start with an experiment, and then scale, and then figure out how you can kind of sustain that. I think that approach has always been, in tech, always the right thing to do. But it feels, because you can do so much so quickly now, it feels like if you end up going down the wrong path 5 years ago, a path that would have taken you 2 weeks now feels like you can kind of get down that same path in a matter of hours. So it's really important to sort of do those small check-ins and make sure that you're not kind of getting down the wrong way. And in terms of sort of, as a purpose-led organization, we are lucky enough to work with a few of those, and I've had conversations with a few of them around the piece of experimentation and kind of playing with new technology and how that works when you're funded by your supporters, and they get called donor dollars by some organizations. I don't know how you guys refer to it internally, but you mentioned on a podcast recently that you're always remembering that the money is not your own. How do you get that balance in terms of investing time and money in experimental tech?
It's a great question. I think so. So you're right. I mean, if you're working in a non-profit and you're not thinking about where the money's coming from and the fact that it's finite, then I'd suggest you need to have a conversation in the mirror, because that's the first place you need to start. People give it the goodness of their heart, and they hope to see impact for that money. But it's a good challenge in terms of how do you make sure you do the right thing. So I touched earlier about working kind of co-creatively with business stakeholders to make sure that you're solving the real pain for them, and there's a pull for the solution, and that the solution you present will have an impact and value in their eyes. Because as the benefits owner, they know what problems they need to solve, and they need to work with you collaboratively to explore those options. So I think that's the first thing. So it needs to be kind of a business stakeholder pull, not an IT push. That makes sense for these sorts of things. I think measuring the benefit is often talked about, but seldom done. We anticipated it to have this impact. Did it really? Well, we never went back 12 months after to look at that and say it went well and this is to be learned going forward, or actually didn't. And what does that mean? But I think you touched earlier on things like innovation and approaches to innovation are quite topical in this sense, because how do you have permission to experiment? That's difficult for some organizations in our space. And an approach to innovation for me is one of two things. It's either you're taking a sniper rifle and you're solving a very specific, targeted, well-articulated, well-measured business problem without trying to boil the ocean and trying to prove value for that. Or equally, you're trying to understand, you're trying to learn. So you're going to roll out a piece of tech and see what's good about and bad about it and get some feedback, which may then lead to, further use cases, further delivery, whatever that may be. But you kind of need to sit in one of those two pots, in my eyes. And experimentation on scale is great, because that may tell you things. Lessons are valuable too. It may stop you investing £1 million in a piece of tech for a business area that you already know will go wrong. That's a valuable lesson, right? You just saved yourself some money. So I think those two pots. But if you land anywhere in between, which is I want to implement this tech across the whole organization as an innovation pilot to solve everything, and it has 50 dependencies, 50 things that need to be fixed first, then you're off to a very sticky start at the beginning on you.
Yeah, and not having the clear sort of that impact measurement thing is just such an
Exactly.
endless
Exactly.
topic of debate, particularly in third sector. I've found from people I've worked with and sort of known, just trying to measure impact when it comes to humans. Sometimes, depending on the innovation or the initiative, it can be okay, but sometimes it is really difficult. But it's so crucial to be able to know if it's been a success or not, so that you can know whether to continue or stop or whatever.
And it's interesting in today's data-driven kind of organizations. I have these conversations quite a lot in the sense that if you can't measure it, did you really have an impact? Well, speak to your people. Are they less fearful? Do they feel more productive? Did you take away that fear? Are they able to do more? That's feedback. That's still data. That's still information you can do something with. And the analogy I often use is, airplanes still have windows for a reason. They aren't just a dash full of dials. There's still a window
Yeah,
for a reason. That's so you can look outside.
nice. I like that. Um, I think it is absolutely kind of critical to know. And I think you're so right about those two buckets, because I think often it can feel like you have to have the output has to be, we achieved X and it did, it did this thing. And I think sometimes the learning is just as valuable, if sometimes not more valuable. Like you say, if it means you've spent X, but it stopped you from spending triple, quadruple that amount, that is a huge amount of value to organizations that
Yeah,
are trying to
absolutely.
solve a lot of problems. I think it's just super interesting, and I think that again, the sort of the tech side of it, how the technology is moving, and how that's going to be able to process the data and give us more sort of insight onto impact, I think will be an
Mm.
interesting one to watch. And so, in general, so you as an individual, what kind of trends are you excited about in the tech space in the sort of upcoming years or months?
A great question. I mean, no one really saw COVID coming, did they? I suppose, and no one really saw generative AI coming. So who knows? We could be sat here tomorrow talking about the next big thing that no one saw coming. I'm still interested in the things that went quiet when generative AI came along. So I'm still interested to see who's doing what with things like the metaverse and blockchain. They've gone a bit quieter. I mean, they're difficult. They're not as accessible, which may be the reason why. But I still think there's opportunities for the metaverse in augmented individuals, for storytelling, for connecting physical and virtual spaces, connecting data to our environment that we observe. And I think there's still a lot of opportunity in blockchain, whether that's in transparency and immutability across the supply chain or other processes. But that's a very nuanced thing and very, very hard to do. But I'm still looking around and keen to hear about stories of success in those two spaces.
Yeah, I think blockchain's a really interesting one, because I think you hear blockchain because obviously that was kind of the thing. There was sort of it felt like there was a period of time where there was just sort of everyone was talking about blockchain, and I feel like it kind of got a bit it sort of got tied in with like crypto and kind of got a bit of a
Yeah.
little bit of a reputation for a particular thing, and also I've found a lot of people just go, it's too complicated. I can't understand it. It's too kind of complicated, because you can simplify, but there's so much nuance, there's so much stuff.
Yeah, there is. And I think it depends on the industry as well. So I was particularly interested in blockchain uses, as I said earlier, in the supply chain. So if I'm an ethical product provider and I want to give you reassurance as the end customer that we're an ethical organization, I want to provide traceability of where my ingredients come from, for example, all the component parts of the thing to show that they're sourced ethically, unaltered, and bought where we said we buy them from. All these kinds of things. And I think the only way you get that is through transparency and immutability. So I think it's those sorts of use cases I find quite exciting. But in an organization like ours, where we want to maybe protect evidence and show authenticity of evidence, that immutability of that evidence over time, being able to protect that and demonstrate it is also quite interesting too.
Yeah, I think fascinating. I had a conversation with someone around blockchain in third sector, particularly in sort of relief and aid, and how sort of tracking that and making sure that people have received what they need to. I was kind of mind blown with it, because I think I was still thinking about blockchain in sort of mainly in financial terms, and then you kind of take a more creative spin on it, and it's kind of, oh god, yeah, you can be sort of tracking all this stuff that's so human, that there's so much value in that, like you say, transparency and that kind of accountability. So that people can see who's received aid and who's received it from what, and from an organizational perspective as well. It's slightly less exciting, but as a COO I find it very exciting, the kind of the traceability of the records, to make sure that there's not sort of duplicated efforts happening, because when you're in a huge organization, you're dealing with people in horrible, horrendous situations, and if there's any kind of chaos and you're just trying to help people, being able to make sure that you've definitely seen the right people, and they're not sort of duplicating efforts, so that everyone's being used the most efficient way as a resource.
Yeah.
I
But I think regardless of the sector you work in, I think the relationship with your customers or supporters is critical, right? And key ingredients of that are trust and credibility and transparency. If you do what you say you do, and you're not going to get caught out or anything like that, I think that's where technologies like this can really play a role to say we can evidence what we say we do. We are cleaner than clean. We can show you stuff. And I think so, as I say, whether that's supporters to show that funds are going to the right place, or whether that's your customers to show that they're getting what they think they're getting, I think they're really important tools.
Definitely. And, you mentioned as well the sort of human rights documentation, just being able to sort of hold, organizations or bodies to say, this document definitely existed. This was a thing that happened. This was an agreement that was made, I think.
Absolutely. This is an authentic photo or video, all that sort of stuff,
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. The blockchain stuff is just, personally, I just find it really sort of fascinating in terms of the possibilities there. And then, you've got the sort of cybersecurity side as well. So we talked earlier about the fact that that's kind of continually changing, and then kind of in, won't go too much into, but in the current climate, how people are sort of feeling with things, just kind of making sure that the safety of your activists is kind of really, really secured.
Yeah. Identity management, another great use case for technology like this, proving who I am.
Yeah, I think it's, the cybersecurity piece, like I said, I have huge respect for you and any of your teams, because my tinfoil hat is very small and I'm still very scared. So the fact that you guys are dealing with what you're dealing with, I think is just incredible. So I think that's really exciting. And then I think you mentioned as well in another interview around sort of digital advocacy tools. So just kind of the rise of social media and digital platforms as well, which obviously is not new tech, but how it's being used, I think is kind of an interesting one.
And also it's been impacted by emerging tech like generative AI. Things like your traditional search engine rankings are kind of going out the window, aren't they? I think I heard someone say not too long back. So even that area is being disrupted. Yeah,
which is a pretty interesting time, I'd say. I think it's I want to end on a kind of positive note, just because I think it's when I'm talking to a lot of people, but at the moment around kind of technical landscape, there is a lot of fear, and it is that there's a healthy caution that needs to be exercised. But I think it's really important to focus on the kind of, like you said earlier, the opportunities and the exciting side of things. Amazing. Okay. Amazing. Well, Paul, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. It's been fascinating to talk to you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.